Hi everybody and welcome back to the channel, 2BeLikeChrist. In today's video we're going to talk about why the church needs to talk about hell. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't get particularly excited when I know the preacher's going to preach on hell Sunday morning. Man, the preacher's preaching on hell, it's going to be hot. It's not exactly the most pleasant subject, and I know a lot of people that get genuinely mad when a preacher preaches on hell. And this video isn't to advocate fire and brimstone sermons every single Sunday, but it is a plea to keep some fire and brimstone sermons in the sermon repertoire. The reason is because we need to understand what we've been saved from. You can never appreciate grace until you realize what that grace is saving you from. It may be disappointing or discouraging to know that the consequences for sin are death and torment and eternal separation from God, but that's the only way for us to be thankful for what God has given to us to the fullest extent. If we don't understand our wretched state, we're never going to be able to appreciate what God has done for us. The reason that people think that they can make it to heaven without Christ, just being relatively good people, moral people, is because they don't understand the ugliness and the hideousness of sin. A good example of this is found in Luke chapter 7. Here we see a great example of somebody who realizes the gravity of their sins and someone who doesn't. Jesus goes into the house of a man named Simon, who was a Pharisee, and he's eating there. And while this is happening, a sinful woman, everyone knows she's a sinner, she comes in and she falls down at Jesus' feet, and she kisses him, and she washes his feet with her hair. Then she begins to wash Jesus' feet with a very expensive type of ointment. But the Pharisee who had invited Jesus to his house looked at the woman in disgust and looked at Jesus, and the text says that he thought to himself, if this man were a prophet, if Jesus was really a prophet, he would know who and what sort of woman this is who is touching him, for she is a sinner. Simon thought to himself, if Jesus really knew everything, then he would never let this woman touch him or fall down at his feet because she's a dirty woman. And even though Simon didn't say this out loud, Jesus actually responds to him and he says to him, Simon, I have something to say to you. And at that point, if I was Simon, I'd be pretty afraid. Jesus says to him, a certain moneylender had two debtors. One owed 500 denarii and the other 50. When they could not pay, he canceled the debt of both. Now, which of them will love him more? Simon answered, the one, I suppose, for whom he canceled the larger debt. And he said to him, you have judged rightly. Jesus then replied as he turned and looked at this woman. He said, Simon, do you see this woman? I entered into your house, and you gave me no water for my feet, but she has wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss, but from the time I came in, she has not ceased to kiss my feet. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with ointment. Therefore I tell you, her sins, which are many, are forgiven, for she loved much. But he who is forgiven little loves little. And he said to her, your sins are forgiven. In essence, it seems that Jesus is saying, Simon, if you knew the condition that you were in and weren't so puffed up in your own self-righteousness, you would be down at my feet, kissing my feet and washing my feet. This woman has many sins, and so she has loved me much. But he says, those who have been forgiven little, love very little. Now, this woman and Simon really were both deserving the same condemnation. In the end, they both, if they hadn't come to Jesus, would be separated from God forever. The difference between the two people is not their eternal destiny without Jesus, but what they do in a response to that realization. This woman is so thankful for the grace that can help her escape what she deserves. Simon, on the other hand, doesn't appreciate grace and what Christ is bringing because he doesn't think his sins are that bad. Both people need Jesus. Both people are in the same room. Both people are under the same condemnation. The response is very different. This is why it's helpful sometimes for us to be reminded what the real consequences of sin are. All have sinned and come short of the glory of God. The wages of sin are death, and we've got to realize that. Otherwise, we'll never appreciate the grace and the gift of Christ to the world. Our lives ought to look more like a woman falling on the floor, kissing the feet of Jesus, than a Pharisee puffed up in self-righteousness who doesn't even bother to welcome his guests the way that he should.